Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off.
All right, it's episode 10. Field boxes, or as I like to call them, go bags. In this episode, Joe and I are going to talk about what we bring to the field, our little go kits or our field kits. And of course, we're going to talk about what we fly and just, any other discussions about things that that's been going on with our forums or with our Discord. The event we put on here, a little build event, and then give you a little update as to what we plan on doing in the near future. So, Joe, why don't you talk to me about what you've been doing at the flying field? Or what have you been doing in the hobby?
Yeah, so the only flying I've done was with you. Last episode I mentioned that I was going to try to come up and see you, and I did get the Spitfire finished in time to be able to come up and see you. The problem with that was it pretty much took me the entirety of the night to get it done. I think I went to bed at 8:30 Saturday morning.
Oh my God, Red Bull was giving you wings for sure.
Monster was giving me Monster Energy.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I don't know why. I just don't really care for Red Bull, but that's personal taste.
I try not to touch the stuff.
So I finally crashed out about 8:30 Saturday morning, and then like 12:30 was when I finally woke up.
Right, you had me give you a buzz at like 11:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, hey, if you haven't heard from me, blow my phone up at 11. I'm like, okay. I wanted to get here safe. But okay, all right. So yeah, you gave me a call back at about noon, saying, okay, I'm up. It's been a long night, but I'm up, and we can still do this.
Yeah, essentially, if you'll still have me, I'll get on the road. And you said, yeah.
Well, how could I say no, man?
Well,
how could I say no?
I think if I had realized how much more needed to go into that plane once I got to your place, because I had built it up to the point that
it was constructed. It was done.
It was constructed. Yep, servos were in.
Yep, servos were in, but the electronics still had to be kind of plugged in and tested and fine-tuned, and I think you still had to make some adjustments to the wire. None of the control wires had been put in.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when you take a piece of foam, a bunch of flat pieces, and turn it into a Spitfire, it looks dang good, by the way.
Thank you.
And you're like, yes, I'm done. And I think we both realized over this last couple of weeks, like, installing electronics is probably specifically half the battle. And that includes wiring everything up, getting all the control rods set, making sure that the programming is correct, all the surfaces are going where they should, that you have the battery set up, the motor is attached with the firewall properly, all that kind of stuff. More than just, I built a plane from flat sheets of foam. And it's, it looks perfect. It's like the next step is to make it fly perfect. So
yeah. So
it takes a while.
I did get out to your place safely. I was some kind of tired, but got there and then brought all my stuff in. Brought my go box, as it were. We'll talk about that in a bit. But then said, okay, I've got like an hour and a half left of work. Like I knew I had that left. And you're like, yeah, come on, hot glue guns running. We'll get this knocked out. Yeah, so control rods need to be cut to size and bent, and a little bit more of getting the servo wire lengths right, so that I had my servo wires were long enough to make it to the receiver, and then needing to make sure everything was plugged in right, actually get the
Mm-hmm.
power pod in the plane correctly for the first time. And, oh, I hadn't put the canopy on, so that needed to be
Mm-hmm.
done. And then you showed me a nice trick where you're, instead of having the canopy run the full length, you'd like cut a cockpit section foam insert so you could open it up and access the electronics, which was really cool. So it's like, yeah, let's do that. And
Mm-hmm.
it was what, four 4 or 5 hours. It seemed
Oh my
like
God,
that we
yeah.
were still building before we finally got out to the field.
Yeah, I think it was like about 6 o'clock or 6:30, closing in on 7 o'clock when I'm like, Joe, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but we are specifically going to run out of light. And I know for a fact that's experience like from a couple weeks from the last week. The Spitfire looks the same coming and going as a silhouette.
Hmm.
And so I knew like when it starts to get to that point, we're going to both have a hard time flying. And I didn't want that to be your maiden experience for the Spitfire. Like I was excited that we were going to be able one. I'm going to help you maiden that plane, which is great.
Hmm.
And we can get into that in a bit. I was so excited to be able to be there with you and do that with you. And I had my Spitfire rolling, and we were able to fly together. And you know, up until recently, I haven't had too many opportunities to, I'll call it fly with somebody, like fly with a friend. I've been able to
Right.
fly at the field, and I feel like a country bumpkin in the country, kind of rolling across the lanes of traffic, and people are like, get out of the way, while I'm flying my little puttering, whatever it is I've got in the sky, and they're zooming by with jets and like, hey, could you take your foam plane down? I don't want to destroy my car's worth of plane. And I'm like, yeah, 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 right. Um, but like when it's you and I flying, it's a totally different experience, right? We're just there having a blast,
Right.
and there's no uh, feeling that we're impinging upon each other's time or experience. In fact, all it feels to me, and I think it's the same for you, is that it's an even better experience.
I think so. And we always have fun when we're flying together. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, even when the flights are disappointing, we still have a good time. So
Yeah, right.
we did get to get out there. The one thing I didn't get to set up that day that I wanted to was I didn't get flaperons programmed, but
Hmm.
I have since figured it out through the programming mix. I didn't use the built-in flaperon function in the transmitter. I actually used, I've got 6 program mix slots on my transmitter, so I was able to program those into 4, and then the
Right.
last 2 will be, I think, going to be mixing in some elevator into
Hmm.
the flat positions, so to help counteract some of that. But so yeah, we got out there, did the initial maiden chuck, which I was like, it's foam, Matthew, it's foam, but I was terrified of that maiden flight, and I
But you
almost
did you did such a good job at building such a beautiful plane. Again, the Spitfire to me is one of the best looking birds, and I know everybody's got their favorite.
mm-hmm,
Apparently, that's one of mine. The P-38 and the Spitfire are some of my favorite looking planes. Anyway, so it's a good looking bird. Like, and I know it's gonna fly well. And like you'd heard all the tales and you didn't want to botch it. Just,
yeah. So yeah, we I almost had you do the maiden flight, and I said no. Let me just belly up to this thing and get it done. And
yeah.
we did the maiden chuck, and
Yeah, I was able to chuck it for you, which allowed you to keep your hands on the sticks, and I think
mhm,
that always helps.
it does,
That's
especially with a
that's always
plane
a
you're
help.
not familiar with.
Hmm.
And I think it had, even though the control surfaces were as zeroed out as I could get them,
Hmm.
I think there was left rudder engaged, so she
I
kind of
think so
went off to
too.
the left.
I was editing the video, and I noticed that when we released the plane that first time, it veered a hard left,
Hmm.
about a 90, ultimately about a 90 degrees by the time you kind of got it back under, uh, going the way you wanted to.
Yeah. Which once it did that, and I recognized that she wasn't flying straight, it was set her down, as I
Mm-hmm.
recall, which busted the prop. Which no big deal, as we're going to talk about later. Carry spare props. So I know I've like again I carry everything, so there's props in my car. So I ran out to the car, got another prop, kind of
Mm-hmm.
adjusted the rather than take the time to try to mess with the control wire, I just threw some trim on the rudder and we chucked her in the air and got her going again, and then she flew.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
and we knew a problem was going to be that she was tail heavy. Um,
Yeah.
I could not get enough front end weight to counteract everything going on with that plane, which we've kind of identified. I think could still be somewhat in my build style and the building that I did on that plane. That maybe I used a bit too much glue on the very back end, but also it's running a smaller motor than that plane was designed around, and I'm running a 3-cell 1300 milliamp hour versus the 4-cell 2200. I think you were saying was recommended for that
Right.
one.
Well, I think when I flew a 4-cell 1300 battery
Okay.
or a 3-cell 2200, and it turns out they're about the same weight.
Okay.
Just one has a lot more power, but for a shorter amount of time. And obviously, the 3-cell that's bigger battery, it lasts for a lot longer, and it's a little bit more docile. Um, but they tend to be less. And you had, geez, that's almost half of the battery.
Yeah.
Um, right, as far as size wise. So you were kind of working under the gun, and you're like, geez, I don't want to put 50 or 60 grams worth of nickels or whatever the heck we were shoving in there,
You had
pennies and
pennies that you
nickels.
had taped into little packets that we had stuffed down into the power pod to try to get some weight on.
Hmm.
I even ended up gluing a stack of pennies under the poster board that formed the nose cone. Um,
That's right. Yeah.
so
Right. And we did that with an attempt because I mean, as we all have found out, I mean, Joe, you kind of knew through your flight simulator days, and anybody who's tried to build these darn things, if it doesn't balance, you're not going to get it to fly for squat.
yeah.
Um, but you did get it to fly, and it was having that kind of porpoising action, which is that's a tail heavy tendency.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of lets you know like you're close, but it's still tail heavy, and it's going to be hard to control. And it tends to be a little squirrely when that happens.
And she
But
was.
yeah, you said you were fighting her
Um, yeah, I was
lot more
fighting
than you
her.
wanted.
Yeah, I was fighting her more than I wanted, and not that she was a bad plane to fly. Like I loved it.
Hmm.
Just we had gotten it fairly close, but she was still on the side of tail heavy, so no amount really of down trim was going to overcome that. And so throughout, like she just had this steady. I'm going to climb for a little bit, then I'm going to
Hmm.
lose it, so I'm going to stall out, drop for a little
Right.
bit, and then
It's such
yeah,
a gentle stall too, though, that
it
it's easy
is.
to recover from.
And we
Yep.
were talking about it as I was flying. There were a couple times you were asking me, did your receiver go out? Are you in a stall? What's happening? Because I took hands off the controller and was because I got it up high enough. I took hands off the controller and just let her fly at I think
Hmm.
about 3/4 throttle at that point to see what she would do. Yeah, she was high
Exactly.
enough up there. She was what 4 accidents high at that point.
Yeah, I
And
think
just
so. She's is pretty up there.
yeah, so she was just letting her do her thing, and we trimmed her out as best we could. But I'm gonna have to do some more work on her as far as center of gravity goes, which I'm also curious to see how putting all the paint on it that's now on it is
Yeah, it's going to
going
be
to
even more
impact
tail
that.
heavy.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be more tail heavy for sure. Because if you think about the center of what I'll call it the center of mass of the plane,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably going to be about the back end of the wing, likely, like the very kind of back edge of maybe where the flaps are.
Right.
Not the flaps, but like the crease line where the flaps are. That's probably about where which is well behind the CG. So you added a bunch of weight back there,
Mm-hmm.
effectively.
Yeah, and that pulls the center of mass backwards. So
Which means you need bigger batteries, dude. Get the 2200 3-cell. You won't. That's what most of the commercial brands, when they design a new plane, they're oftentimes going to design it around the 3-cell 2200 milliamp battery.
Right.
It's heavy enough. It provides enough power for long enough for you to have a good time flying. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is not saying what you have is bad. It's just if you had those, you would have options
Yes.
when you're building different planes.
Well, for this plane, I do want to get
Gotcha.
I do want to get the 4-cell battery, and I want to get a bigger motor. Because when we were flying, like you got your Spitfire up there alongside me, and there was a noticeable difference in just speed and power. Um, on a 3-cell battery, and I don't have my motor on me, but it's the B pack motor.
It's the
Um,
VPAC, yeah. It's a
yeah,
2213, I think.
2208, 22, yeah, something like that. And
It's
then
a, yeah.
it's 1100 kV, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yep.
it's definitely a slower spinning motor, but it
But it's
will.
good.
Yeah, like it was great for the Fogey. It's been great for everything. It's just it got the Spitfire into the air. It just was not going to get that Spitfire ripping and running. Um, at least
So
not in a way that I'm comfortable with. Because we did end up putting your 4-cell in it after my 3-cell went out, and it
come to the dark side.
I'm gonna have to get a 4-cell battery because that made a huge difference in
Yeah.
the speed of it. Like put that 4-cell on it, and she wanted to boogie, but I was still running a lower RPM motor, if you will, and then a lower fly speed prop because I'm running a slow fly prop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but she still got it going pretty good. That said, the motor was already warm coming off the 3-cell. When we called it out, well, I say when we called it, when the plane decided it was done, and
Yeah.
I picked it up and felt that motor. I mean, that motor was blistering. I know we say that they can get hot, but it
Yeah.
was cooking.
It
So
was tough. It was tough. Yeah. And I think part of the reason why we called it is so it became that it was silhouette flying. It was a beautiful sky. I mean, it was a
it was
really
gorgeous.
gorgeous
It was
sky.
so much fun. Even though
Yes.
it was silhouette flying, it was beautiful. Like you were up there
Yeah.
with me, and
Yeah.
I'll let you talk about, but you got Quinn on the controls there for a while, and like
Mm-hmm.
then you and I were flying together again, and so we were kind of flying formation where I was flying behind you as best I could, but you were leaving me in the dust. So I said, "Well, you fall in behind me," and we started
Yeah, I was
flying
trying to keep
together.
the trying to keep the throttle back so that I could keep like in
And I'm over
line with
here at
you and
full
stuff. And it's
throttle. I'm trying, man.
yeah, and I'm like, that's okay, it's okay. It's just it's really hard with the CPAC radial and like the higher battery. It's like, oh, this is tough.
Mm-hmm.
But no, but it was good though. So much fun. And we had a point there where I was kind of doing some acrobatics around you, like, oh, it's combat, and I was kind of joking. And then there's a point where you were like, oh, that might actually hit you.
Yeah.
We might have a collision here. But it was tough to tell because everything looked like a cutout piece of paper
I
flying
mean,
in the sky.
yeah, you were cutting literal loops around mine. Was
Uh,
the difference between the two motors and batteries, and you were just flipping and rolling it all around me. And then, yeah, at one point you did a run on me that I just knew was going to take both of us out of the air. And but like you said, we were talking the other night. You could have missed me by a few inches. You could have missed me by 20 feet. Like we
by
couldn't
20
tell.
feet. It was so impossible to tell. But we had a lot of fun, and that was good. That was so much fun.
It was.
And yeah, I grabbed my kid, and because we had the buddy box still set up, so he's like, "Hey, can I try flying, Dad?" And I'm like, "This is silhouette flying. I'm having a hard time flying." But you know what? This wouldn't be bad experience, right? He showed himself to be pretty decent at flying, and I'm like, "Okay, why don't we do this?" So he goes up and he's flying around, but I don't know. My kids just love to turn the planes upside down and see what they can do. And I'm like, don't do that. That's hard for dad to recover from. That's hard for anybody, let alone like a silhouette of a Spitfire upside down, which by the way looks very similar to a Spitfire right side up,
Yeah, it does.
going or coming. or upside
Learned that one
down.
the hard way.
Exactly, right?
We'll
And
talk about
you
that in a
need
minute.
plenty, right? Like you need plenty of time and plenty of space in the sky to be able to make a choice, because you got to choose what way is the plane going. I think it's going this way, and you make a correction and realize, oh, that's not what's happening, and you have to have enough time for your brain to process what is happening and
Hmm.
why. Like, oh, it's inverted and not going away, but coming towards me. Wow, that's a totally different animal. Let me correct for it. My kids love to fly slow. They love to fly upside down, and they're happy to do acrobatics on a whim, which means you're going, from being 2 accidents high to being 1 accident high faster than you can say, "Uh-oh." And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there kicking on the trainer and trying to figure out what direction is it going, and try to recover it in time not to crash the plane. But
Hmm.
it was fun, and he was like, "Holy cow, Dad, that was so tough. Like that was not easy." And I'm like, "Yeah, I said pretty good experience, right?" It's like, "Yeah, that was crazy. Like I don't know. I'm not ready to do that again though. Like that was fun though."
Well, it was funny too because we were like he was up there flying with me at that point, um, and I was kind of trying to stay in his area so we could be flying together.
Hmm.
And then I started hearing the questions of which one am I, Dad? Which one am I? Which one am I? And I,
And
and I
that
said,
was what we were having a hard time with too.
and I said, let me move away, let him focus on his play because I get it, like you're sitting there looking at two silhouettes. Like it doesn't matter if they're
Hmm.
painted different colors, and mine was just white, but in that light, it was just a black
Yeah,
shape in the
yeah,
sky. And there's two of them moving together. So
yeah.
yeah.
Ooh, look, it's a Spitfire.
Hmm.
You
And
know?
then you talk about they look the same. Uh, coming to, going away, upright or upside down, and then there's the tree line. And once that shadow gets to the tree line level, you kind of lose it until your eyes say, "There it is."
Yeah, it
Yeah.
literally disappears in the tree line because you just have a black sky against, or a black plane against a like orange sky, and then once it dips below the black tree line, now you've got a silhouette that just disappeared,
Hmm.
and you're of course now 40 feet above the ground if you're lucky,
Yeah.
maybe lower. That's where it all gets really dangerous. So yeah, we were doing our best to try to bring it down safely, because that wasn't easy to keep orientation while you're getting that low.
Yeah. And I really don't understand exactly what happened, and I'd be curious to see if your camera caught that footage. But I was below the tree line, so it was closer to us than it had been. It was fairly low. I don't know if I was trying to get ready for a landing or if I was about to take it back up. I don't remember it from that particular
Was it?
moment. But
Do you remember if it was in the first one or it was the second?
no, it was definitely what. Oh no, this was with the forecell because this is
Okay.
what ended the night.
It would be, if it's on anything, it would be on the hat cam. And if I recall right, the hat cam had kind of gone kaput somewhere
Okay,
in the middle. But we'll see. I know I'll call it the fence cam, because I kind of stuck the my cell phone on the fence and just sort of
right.
had it shoot us. That ended up cutting out shortly after we had done our first run together, where we could still kind of see the colors of the planes,
Mm-hmm.
and it hadn't gone completely silhouette yet. So that was after, like, you did your first run, you brought it around, you fixed it, we sent it back up in the air, and then I sent mine back up in the air, or up in the air with you. We flew around together, and then it came down, and we brought it down.
Right.
Um, and I think that's where the recording of that part stopped,
Okay.
and I didn't have much else. So if the hat cam has it, hopefully, that's what I was about to go look at in the next couple days here and see if I can pull together a video for our listeners that
Okay.
extends throughout this whole thing. So
So, however it happened, I was fairly low to the ground. I thought she was right side up until I gave it a either up or down input. And Matthew, you knew stuff went south when you're looking at your plane up in the sky, and all of a sudden you hear from me, "Oh crap, she's inverted," and you knew I was low.
I knew you were coming in for a landing or something. And I was like, "Oh, that's not good at all." And of course, I can't look away from my plane to be able to help you because if I do that, I will likely lose it at that point too.
Oh yeah,
And I just felt terrible for you.
there was
But
no help in that because it was so close
no.
to the ground. I managed a snap reaction that got her. I mean, she probably grazed a bit of the grass on the way, but
Yeah,
I managed to get her back up and like nosed up away from the ground. But then she was
probably.
like still rolling and twisting, so it was sort of like a
Mhm.
throttle back. And all right, let's let her hit the ground and like minimize damage. But about that time, it seemed like, oh wait, maybe I actually have some control over her. So I was giving a little bit of throttle, and oh wait, no, it just looked like I did. I don't. So now there's throttle on it, so I'm pulling it back. But as that happens, I was like, oh wait, maybe I do actually. So it was just throttle up, throttle down, throttle up, throttle, just trying, and she's just all over the place
Talk about
until
proverbial roller coaster, both emotionally and physically with the plane.
absolutely. Because I
Oh
mean, at
man.
that point, I couldn't tell what she was doing. I couldn't tell which way was up, left, whatever,
Mhm.
and it ultimately ended in part of the trouble was I forgot in that moment that I was on the four cell. So I
Yes.
was
Right.
trying to give her 50% throttle, which I had like quickly gauged from my time with my three cell. 50% was not enough to keep her airborne, but enough to have some wind over the control surfaces so I can do something with her.
Yeah, you still had
50
control, but it was going to be a descending control.
yeah, 50% with the four cell was a different
You're
beast completely.
you're good to go, baby. Keep flying.
So I was like, why can't I get it? Anyway, she ended up nose down in the ground, but she caught a wing first and then did
Yeah, she started to.
this beautiful cartwheel
Yes.
that just
Yes.
to the point that I cut the throttle at that point, went ahead and hit my throttle hold so that it
Mhm.
didn't try to rev up when we went over to it later. We ended up picking up the plane, both blades of the prop were caught, and we walked over to where I guessed the motor had actually hit, and both props, or both blades of the prop, were sitting there, boop, right where they had popped off the. So she just rolled, and the
Yeah.
pressure got each blade as it went, and the
Oh
damage
my
was
god.
minimal. Like I was really impressed with the Spitfire's crashability, if you will.
Sure. Its sturdiness. It's a pretty sturdy plane. And then you and I talked about I know when I was building mine, the addition I made to it for this it looked to me when I saw this before, I'm like, "Oh, if this hits wrong, it's going to cartwheel like crazy."
Hmm.
So I ended up putting a barbecue skewer in each of the groove lines along the folds of the top of the wing on the outer wingtips.
Right.
So that way it would transfer the load in and hopefully strengthen that outer edge piece just long enough so it could survive that wingtip hit.
Hmm.
Um, and so that way, you can maybe pick it up after that cartwheel.
And so in repair since then, I did put those barbecue skewers in. It was a little more
Mhm.
difficult, I think, probably to put them in after the fact than if I had done it.
Always is.
But I remember you had said something about that. But I ended up putting that barbecue skewer in the spar of the wing, not in those
Yes. Yeah.
folds. So
Right. You misunderstood kind of what I was getting at, but that's, I mean, it'll still help in this part too. But I was trying to help you. Built enough of the things where the wingtips were the weak point.
hmm.
Every piece of the plane was really pretty sturdy. It could cartwheel like mad, except the wingtips would always fold in. And the only way to really save that stuff is to either put a popsicle stick in it, but they tend not to be quite long enough. So the barbecue skewers really kind of bring that load that the wingtip sees in a cartwheel into the folded piece and the more structurally stable piece of the plane. So it
Right.
transfers it all the way into the spar and into the wing where the servos typically sit, and it does a really good job of transferring that. So
Hmm. So I did that in the next few nights at home. I kind of went in there with a barbecue skewer. kind of dug at those folds, those creases, and
Hmm.
came in them at an angle, like really pushed that foam down, got them in there as best I could, and then just laid the hot glue to it like crazy. And then went back and squeegeed off excess. But I squeegeed off the
Sure, right.
initial excess and then went back for a second pass where I was really laying in that excess that I had scraped off. I was really pushing it in, but then also scraping it off as I went. So it's got
Sure.
a
So there
good
wouldn't be
bit.
much extra.
Yeah, it's got a real good uh, bulk of glue holding those barbecue skewers in, and those barbecue skewers ended up pulling the damage largely out of the wing. Like there's still a bit of
Hmm.
a bit of a crease right there, some wrinkle lines, but it pulled the shape
Yeah.
of the wing back in. I've not put it back in the air since, but we've had other things going on, so um,
Well, I can't wait to hear about how flyable it is after that.
I think
Um,
it's going to be
uh,
fine. I really do.
yeah, I do too. And the cool part is, was not only did you repair it, but you did something else that was pretty awesome. And I'll tell you what, I'm impressed with it. It looks, I think, if I had gone with the scheme you had, I would have hoped that it would have turned out so good. Said you had painted yours. What did you do?
So got two tones of green, trying to go for the I guess is actually like the camo scheme I was going for is actually three tone, but I went with two, a lighter and then a uh,
Hmm.
darker green. Going for that more like I don't know if it's organic, but the real like blobby
Yeah,
um
it's the camo,
camo.
the green camo
Yeah,
kind of
I
look.
it was a camo I grew up around, as opposed to
Hmm.
today's digi camo and all that.
We
When
don't
you
want to
think
talk about that.
military camo. So yeah, and it's I think it fits the era of that plane decently. I'd have to actually look at what was going on
It,
around the era of that plane, but it turned out okay. It was just a base coat, which I did a couple passes, so I wasn't wetting my paper and having it peel. But I did a couple passes with the lighter green to
hmm
get the base color on, and then I went back with the darker green and put in the splotches, so it kind of cut through and formed the light green
hmm
around it, and it was forming around it, and it across the wings. Some of it bled up into the fuselage, so it's we'll have pictures that we can put in the show notes for everybody who's interested to have a look. But I'm glad you like it. I like it. I'm ready to see it in the air
hmm
again.
Yeah, I think the only thing, you shared a picture with a couple of us, and I think the only comments you got from that, besides "Man, that looks great. Can't wait to see that in the air," was what kind of markings are you going to put for orientation? Because as you found out in the silhouette flying, the once it gets to a certain height, it's going to become a silhouette more or
Hmm.
less, and really you have to have a stark difference between the coloring on the top and the coloring on the bottom. For the way I pointed mine, and I can't say it's the best way to paint it, but it was yellow on top and blue on the bottom with the color. Like I carried the yellow to the top, but minimally, or I mean, sorry, the blue. Um, but it that stark difference between the yellow on top and the blue on the bottom really helps um, in normal daytime flying to be able to tell at least am I looking at the top of this thing or am I looking at the bottom of it? Because that's you still may not be able to tell if it's coming or going, but you'll be able to
Right.
tell if you're looking at the top of it or bottom.
Hmm. So yeah, that's been me so far.
Well, good. um, so I think you covered our I'll call it our impromptu ARCN Spitfire fly-in. So I like to call it.
The two of us, right?
Yeah, it's us. It's just us flying. I mean, but come on, let's make it big. Let's make it grand. Um,
I mean, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. It was the two of us.
it was just the two of us, but we had a good time. Like it was a giant fly. It was the three of us, really, three or four of us, because I had my kids
Oh
with us.
yeah, because
So,
you had your two boys out
and
there.
Quinn did join. So yeah, so that we continued the buddy box experience with my kids. So Quinn joined in the silhouette flying, and I think that gave him, I guess, it gave him a lot of respect for kind of how hard that was. And it also gave him a lot of confidence that he was able to do it. It was scary, and he's doesn't want to do it anytime soon, but he was happy he tried it, and it was a more or less a success. And then, so the next day, I went out with my other son because we had lost the canopy. I was flying, and all of a sudden, that
Right.
little canopy that we talked about, um, I was flying way out over the football field at the far side of the field, and I noticed I turned and went vertical, and or did a loop or flip or something like that, and I noticed I'm like, there's something kind of fluttering down. I'm like, that's not good. I'm like, but it's not a battery because it would have fell down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, we'll look for that later. Turned out it was the canopy came off, so we went out there the next day, found the canopy, which is great. We're like, hey, we found the canopy, cool. So we put that in, and I got the buddy box going. I had attempted to fly. I'll call it an oldie but goodie, but basically it was a fantasy design build that I had built completely, but I had miscellaneous issues with the electronics. So like I had a servo start twitching, so I'm like, shoot, I gotta pull that out. And then like the SC was doing weird stuff, and then I couldn't seem to get. There's too much wiggle in certain pieces of the plane. I'm like, I gotta fix it. I really shouldn't let that be okay. So I fixed that, and I eventually brought it out that day to maiden it. So I maidened it. Um, if you've ever seen a CUDA, Lane's Planes makes a thing called a Barracuda or a CUDA. That's
Okay.
apostrophe CUDA. It's a slightly swept forward wing. This is a very similar design to that. Basically, like a flying wing with a long. Um, uh, think of it like the Star Wars fighters that Luke flies in Episode 4. In that
Uh,
it's like
the
wings in the
X-wing.
back and just yeah, the X-wing. It's like
Okay.
but a long fuse, and there's a motor in the front. Okay, so it just kind of pulls it through the sky. And so I finally got it all set up, and I brought it out, and it kind of flew, but it was really squirrely. I have a feeling I needed to bring the battery up, but before I could really do a couple more tests with it, um, there was only regular packing tape holding the two wing halves together at this point, and I think I had the rudder was cutting through the back of the wing. So what happened is during the stress, it packing tape, all it takes is like a little nick, and you can kind of pry it apart real easy.
Right.
It's impossible to pull apart on its own, but you get a little nick in there and it's done, right? So I think that's what happened with this guy. It got a nick in that joint, and it just kind of opened up, and the two halves kind of basically fell apart, which I
Hmm.
didn't expect. I was like, "Hey, that's not supposed to happen." Like,
Yeah.
oh well. Worse things could happen. It did sort of fly, not well. Um, I'm gonna look some more at the footage and see if I can learn a little bit about it so that I can know where to kind of place the battery next time, and some other improvements I plan to making, quick adjustments, retaping the wings together, regluing them, um, and then seeing if I can get that thing flying because it's one I've built. I was really excited about. It looks great. It's the Heaven Spade Dragster. And if you go on the flight test forums and look for Foamy DM and Heaven Spade, you'll see a handful of those, handful of, I think, three different aircraft that are from the fantasy build, and one of them is Dragster. So take a look at it if you want. I'll see if I can link it in the show notes. But I gave that a go. It didn't quite work, but I'm a lot closer than I thought I ever would. So I'm hoping that I might be able to button that up and start really feeling good about putting plans out there and putting a good flight video out. So I did that, and then while we were out there, I was trying a couple different planes, like a Polaris. I scaled down half. That didn't work out so well, and I think most of that had to do with the fact that the grass at the soccer field hadn't been cut because nobody's at school physically, really. So the it was long grass, and it was enough to slow the Polaris down, not to get it in the air. And then every time it did, I had such full rudder, it was like doing a ground loop almost. So that didn't work. And then I think I tried the mini Spitfire yet one more time. It's a micro mini Spitfire. I think either Griffly or somebody like that on the forums and put it together. And I don't know. I just haven't had any luck with it. But I did have luck with the Spitfire. Um, so that Saturday we recovered the canopy, and after I tried to maiden the Heaven Spade Dragster, which didn't work out. I ended up getting the Spitfire out, and I got my son on the buddy box, my little guy, I said, let's see what we can do. So we took it in the air and we flew it around for a good 4 or 5 minutes or so. And then he was getting pretty confident with it. And I don't know, maybe I was getting overconfident in his abilities, but he likes to fly lower and he also likes to fly inverted.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were starting to fly, and all of a sudden I realized, like, oh shoot, he's really close to the tree line, way at the back of the field, near the softball field back there. I'm like, oh no, oh shoot, he's going right for the tree line. That's me. I'm in charge of that. Oh no. I just kind of like, he's doing so good. And we were taking it back and forth. Like I take it and bring it up and then let him fly it for a while. I bring it down and eventually like I hit, uh, I have a video. I hit it all the way to the throttle cut, which means I tried to basically bring it up, but I didn't have any throttle to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it just went burp, right into the very tippity top of, well, it looks like 40-foot trees or 45-foot pine trees that we have.
Nice.
And so I'm like, oh no, you got it just stuck in the tree. I'm like, okay, you didn't get it stuck in the tree. Daddy was in charge of this thing, and Daddy got it stuck in the tree. I said, but dang, man, oh, all right, let's go take a look. So we went to see if we could find it. So we went out, we looked for it. We found it hanging upside down in the tree. The wind was blowing ever so gently, and it was just sort of just gently sitting in the tree. A little bit of a wind shift kind of shoved it down, and it fell hanging by the tail. So it caught on something hanging by the tail. And I'm like, oh, so close. So because of the softball field, there's a ditch, and that's where all the foul balls go. So we ended up taking about 4 or 5 softballs or baseballs from the ditch and just hucking them up to the trees and seeing if we could knock it down maybe. And my arm's not that good, and my kids are definitely not old enough to have an arm to throw that high. So we gave it a try for a good 45 minutes, and then we went home with our heads down. Man, that sucks. And then I think I was kind of looking forward to. I saw a couple plane designs that I got excited about. I think Hangar RC has this really neat looking plane called the 7. And so I printed out a half scale set, and I
Mm-hmm.
had stuff from the Dollar General, which is literally half the size of traditional foam board from the Dollar Tree. So I just built a half size version because on a whim. It turns out it goes together really well. And the other day I got a chance to fly it, to maiden it, and it flies really good. If only I had remembered to glue the motor mount to
Mm.
the fuse.
That
I think I
could
would have had
help.
a lot more fun. Yeah, it turns out it would help a lot. Um, but I mean, the wires for the motor were in it, and it was kind of taut, so it generally stayed in. I was able to actually give it a couple goes around the field, but it did act a little wonky. But I think most of that had to do with when it came down, like, "Yeah, that motor's wiggling more than it should, considering it's supposed to be glued in." I realized afterwards, I'm like, I know why I didn't glue it in. I was going to pull the whole thing out and cut the inner box out so I could put wires through it,
Ah.
or do something else with it, or potentially cut a different size to fit like an F-Pack power pod or something like that. So I decided to go with a bunch of other things. Completely forgot that I hadn't glued it in for that reason. So anyway, uh, at that scale, it's very light. I was flying it on a 2-cell 4500 milliamp battery with basically the APAC. It's an 1806 2300 kb motor with a 5x4 5x3 prop, like stuff that's on a quadcopter,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a 12 amp ESC. So nothing crazy. 3.7 gram servos in it, and I had no orientation markings on it, which turns out that's probably a bad idea. It's a sport flyer, so it has a symmetrical airfoil. It has a relatively similar look from the top and the bottom, so at least having some sort of coloring markings would have been smarter. But I flew it, and it flew pretty well, and it went together really well, so that's pretty good. Um, and so that was nice. I think that pretty much sums up what I flew. A handful of failures trying to get a bunch of maidens going. I had one pretty decent maiden, and I had a buddy box excited. Oh, I know what. The follow up to the buddy box. So about 3 days later, it rained and it got a little bit more windy and stuff like that. And I was hoping that the with between the rain and the extra wind, that it was enough to kind of weaken some of the paper and some of the connection between the paper and the foam, so that something gave and the plane would come down. So we went out and we started looking in the ditch, and the kids were like, we found it, we found it. And they came out. They had this. The plane is as big as my youngest son, so he's holding it up by the tail like it's when you see a grown man catch a shark, he's
Right.
holding the shark by the tail, that kind of deal. He's got the plane by that. Um, and so yeah, so we brought it home pretty triumphant. The tail section had a piece kind of peel off, but it was all still there. A little bit damaged. I honestly think we could probably spray glue it back together. And then it must have hit two branches hard on the way down.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
the damage on the wings.
yeah, those are some pretty serious divots in the wing. So I don't know what we can do to repair them, but at the same point, I don't think they're truly going to affect too much in the way of flight characteristics, especially if I'll call it, tape over the airfoil dent and restore the airflow characteristics, even though it won't look right at all. Um,
You're a braver man than I am, Matthew.
well, here's the thing. I can choose to say, well, it's done. Pull everything out and toss, the whole plane and rebuild, right? Um,
Or you can just
you know
find
me.
out.
Or I could find out, and it will probably fly really well. If it doesn't, my thought is like, well, it's not a whole lot different than what it is now, really. The
Hmm.
good news is I recovered the SE, I recovered the motor, I was able to recover the receiver. I think I didn't plug it in with the new battery, but I mean, I think the battery's gone. I had a battery checker in it, so
Oh,
some poor soul was hearing it beep for probably about an hour or two, as it was on low battery mode before it got so low the beeper stopped. But yeah, the battery's a goner. But other than that, I mean, everything else looked like it's in good working order. So, Dollar Tree, there was the waterproof brown foam board painted with spray paints. So, about as short of putting like a polyurethane or something on it, it's about as waterproof as you're going to get.
yeah.
It seemed to hold up pretty good. So I'll keep listening, and I'll update you with what fires up and what doesn't.
Well, good. I'm looking forward to hearing what electronics made it through all that.
I know, right? Me too.
All right. So with flight stories over, we'll move on. Now we did have after last episode, uh, Jeff reached out in the Discord and asked a question. He had just bought a Spectrum, uh,
DX6 3.
yeah, DX6 G3 transmitter, and we had just had that episode on transmitter, so he was sort of getting some other opinions on, was it a decent transmitter, and bang, what's a more bang for buck kind of transmitter. So why don't you start with that one? Um,
Sure. Right, right. Um, and that's the thing is we had the great part about putting those listener comments in our Discord. There are a number of other listeners who kind of come into the Discord chat and kind of see what's going on, and they'll make comments here and there. So there was a basic discussion about what's the best bang for the buck, and it depends on what your needs are and how, kind of like we talked in the transmitter episode. I mean, some of it's preference, right? Some people love their brand. And
mm-hmm,
we talked, part of what I talked to them about is I said, when you're spending that kind of money, you're just getting into this hobby. You're spending probably more than half of your budget on a transmitter for a hobby you're not sure you're going to like. You're going to be super excited about the brand you choose. Whatever it is you choose, you're going to be behind it because that's all you got for a long time. So you don't want to feel bad about what you picked. And the good news is, for the most part, like short of getting, I'll call it like I did, the Hobby King super duper cheap version. Um, and I'm using Hobby King because they're one of the few people that have ridiculously cheap transmitters that are under $30. Um, but really, like, you're not going to go terribly wrong. The
mm-hmm.
Fly Sky is probably, I think, hands down one of the best budget transmitters. The ranges are good. Most people have a great experience. It's 6 channels. It's inexpensive, but yet you can do most of the basic programming that you need to do. You can set up flaps and gears and rates and expo and all that kind of stuff. And there's enough models where you're going to be flying it for a long time. Um, but it's not going to have a ton of the like extra. Like you're not going to have preset elevons and flaperons but you might actually have some of that in there. Honestly, I don't have one, so I don't know for sure, but it's going to be not as feature packed, but it's definitely going to be more than anything most beginners need to change out for a long time. Much like the Turnigy 9X and the
Mm-hmm.
Tyrannus 9XD. Like those are like Tyrannus was killing the market forever until, was it Jumper came along and said, um, we're gonna we can do it for less, and we can also talk to other protocols. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, cool. But they borrowed that OpenTX, which was an open source project platform, and said this is excellent. When with this, we can do so much more. And really, I would say bang for the buck right now is that Radio Master Jumper T16 kind of genre right now, and but you're not going to go wrong with almost anything you choose. Like I said, and then we talked about the other half of the bang for the buck is how much is your receivers, right? I mean, you have one transmitter and you're going to use it for everything you do for a long time, so you want to pick a good one. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to not have to pull the receivers out of my planes and shove them to the next plane every time I have to fly. I like to have a couple of them to leave in some planes I know are good planes. Like
Right.
the FT Arrow, I love to death just because it's ridiculous. When it's working, it's so good. I always like to have one in there because that's such a great plane to have in your car. Um, anyway, so that was pretty much it. I mean, we wanted to have a discussion about it. I'm not the only one who chimed in. We had a bunch of different people kind of adding their voice to their thoughts on it. Um, and I appreciate the listener feedback. I thought that was a great way to kind of interact about the topic that we had talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I thank you,
just
Jeff, for joining in there with that.
absolute. And just throw my 2 cents on that because I had talked with him for a little bit when he asked that question. The that I've got the DX6 G3 pulled up now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think he was concerned that he had just that it is a pricey transmitter. Certainly not the priciest out there. We've seen some
No.
very high
Right.
price transmitters. Um, and it could have just been, hey, is this a good transmitter? Did I spend too much on that? Because especially like I said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I got my Turnigy 9X, which sure is a nine channel transmitter, and like you can still pick that up for like $80 or $85. But
Mm-hmm.
he and I talked. I had a look at the transmitter, and not that I know a ton, but when I first looked at it, I was like, okay, I kind of recognize this transmitter because my
Mm-hmm.
father-in-law has the base version of it for his stuff. But then
GX5,
I
right?
started
Right.
digging into it, and it's got some nice features to it.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that my Turnigy 9X doesn't have. So you've got programmable voice alerts on your transmitter that
Mm-hmm.
that comes on the DX6 G3.
Right.
And it's got a wireless trainer link, which I guess is like where I have to plug in an aux cable between my transmitter and another one to do the
Right.
trainer thing. Like it's got that via wireless. And the one that really stood out to me, as aside from just having a nicer, say, LCD interface in mine, was it's got built-in telemetry. So it's sending information to the plane, and the plane with the right receiver is capable of sending back telemetry data that you can then view on your transmitter
Mm-hmm.
right there. And I
Yep.
mean that's like what? So yeah, there's features when you're looking at a transmitter that you bought that you're like, man, it was this the best bang for buck? But yes, no, maybe, but look at all the like when you're looking at what you did get, like what did you get in that package that a
Right.
cheaper model didn't have, like that, integrated telemetry or that telemetry being sent back from the plane. Like, I don't get that
Mm-hmm.
information. I've got, compared to that, I've got a cheaper transmitter. I don't have the huge number of models that can be stored in it. I don't have. There's a couple features there that that bump in price says we've got, and if that's what you're looking for, then that is worth the buck you spent. It's all, what are you looking
Exactly.
for?
Exactly. And honestly, whatever you end up getting, go with it. Don't look back. Use
Mm-hmm.
it. Use everything you can. Take that lemon and squeeze the living daylights out of it until there's nothing left. Enjoy the crud out of it. And then, when you're done and you're like, this isn't enough lemon for me. Like, I don't know what. I went with a bad analogy maybe. But point is only at that point, okay, then you start looking around. You know what I
Right.
mean? You're gonna be happy with what you got. Enjoy it. Work with what you have. Maybe if you're at a flying field, you'd be like, "Hey, man, do you mind if I borrow your transmitter? Could you show me what's the differences here? Like, I'm familiar with mine. Like, what's the cool part about what you have?
Mm-hmm.
And then have that way you don't have to buy any. But a lot of hobby stores will even have a bunch that they can have you look at, or they'll tell you because they'll have all their customers are going to come in with their own transmitters, and they kind of have to understand what they're working with, so they have a pretty good working knowledge too if you have one nearby. So good. Oh, was there any other listener comments that
Um.
you saw?
Yeah. No, none that were specifically stated as such. I think we talked with some
Hmm.
guys in Discord,
Yeah.
but nothing that wasn't
No,
handled there.
absolutely. Exactly.
So speaking of Discord, last episode we talked about doing a build night. Matthew, why don't you talk to us about that?
Dun, 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 dun. No. Yeah, we had a build party, or a build night. It's what we called it. So this past Saturday, the 12th, between 7 and 11, we got together. We basically went on our Discord channel, which we had some links up, and we went into the build party video chat channel, which is open to anybody who's in the group. So if you're hanging out in the text group, and you notice a handful of people are on with you, and you just go, "Hey, man, are you building?" And a couple people are probably going to say, "Yeah." If you want to get on a video chat with them and then just talk about the hobby or show off what you're doing or ask a couple questions like, "Hey, do I put this barbecue skewer here? Or does anybody have you ever built this?" By all means, get together, go in that build party video chat, and just have something. I think we saw some activity doing it earlier in the week, which
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what a great way. If you're going to be building anyway, why not have a couple people that are interested in the hobby with you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it gives you company, it gives you somebody to talk to while you're doing it, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see what somebody else is doing. Like, there's some regulars in there that you talk to, and occasionally I pop
Mm-hmm.
into, and I mean, every time I pop in, they're building something. They're,
Oh
Joe, what do
man,
you want to
yeah.
build next? What do you want to build the next thing?
They're worse than me. I think the only difference is I think they get to a point where their plane is less than usable and they scrap it. And I have yet to do that too much. So that's I, I think that's coming though. I'm running out of room.
Yeah, they
Um
they don't have mountains of planes in the background of their webcam.
I don't have that yet. Well, I'm in the wrong room for that. I would though. All right.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, what I think we want to do is just thank every listener who came by. We had a bunch. I'm going to list a bunch of them off. If I'm missing you, though, please don't take offense. Um, we had I was in and out of the station because I'm working with my kids, putting them to bed at various points, and I know Joe had to go and do a couple things here and there. So, and that's the nature of the build party. We're doing builds that we were working on. I know I was working on finishing up that half scale HR, had the Hanger RC7 that I had built. I was trying to put the electronics in, which apparently took all the build
All
party,
night.
which is ridiculous. Uh, I really didn't expect that. I was just working on a couple other little pieces of other things too, but for the most part, that's what I was working most on. I was like, why is this taking so long? It didn't help that one of the servos started burning out. The gear went and I think it was hooked up to the wrong channel. That channel's telling it 100%. So it eventually like pushed through the gear and started wearing the motor, and that motor was cooked. That motor was cooked inside that little servo,
Hmm.
a little 3.5 gram. So I had to pull the servo out, find another one that was working, put those in. And they're working still, which is good. But yeah, that definitely took a little bit extra time. And plus, it was exciting to be able to talk to everybody and see what's going on.
Yeah.
We had people from all sorts of places across mostly our time zone, but not all. I think we had our friend over in Israel, Mayan, and we had a couple guys in Canada. We had a couple guys on the West Coast and some on the East Coast, and a handful of them in between. I know. Some people were destinations unknown.
Hmm.
So let's see, we had Squirrel Tail, Battle Axe, Zediac, the Hanger RC, Ron, Mayan, my son Quinn. He was joining. He was starting his build on the Vector, FT Vector. Um, the of course us. We were there.
Hmm.
Uh, Flight team, I think, is how it goes. It's either Flight
Flight.
AM or
Yeah.
Flight
Flight
team.
AM. Jeff.
I think that's Jeff. Yeah.
Yep.
Griff Flyer and T106 were there. So again, if you haven't noticed, we're going to be doing this again. We're looking to do it every about once a month or so, somewhere in there. We'll announce it a couple. We'll try to do it a couple episodes out, giving everybody enough time to kind of catch up on listening, and set their calendar. And we just love to have you. If you want, come on by, just see what we're doing, see what other people are doing. Bring a plane. And I say by bring a plane, basically bring your computer over to your build table
Yeah.
and let us join in and see what you're up to.
All right. What do you say we get to the meat and potatoes of this one?
Oh, we got potatoes? I didn't know.
Well, I'm not supposed to have potatoes right now, but I'll have the meat. You can have the potatoes.
All right, fair enough. All
All
right,
right.
so no, we're on to our topic. And what was the topic, Joe?
We're talking about field boxes, or as you like to call it, a go box.
Yeah,
Uh,
I call it a go box because I try to keep everything in this one Aldi's bag that's massive, because Aldi's always has their bags are massive, but it's got everything I need. And all I do when it's time, I just grab the bag and the planes and put them in the car. And with any luck, I've done it right. And that's all I have to think about.
hmm So we're going to start with what's in my box. Then we're going to talk about what's in your box, and then we're
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about a
What
more
should be in our boxes.
what should be what should be there. And just a caveat on that, we'll kind of recover it when we get there. But
Yeah.
when we say what should be in the box, that's based on the kind of flying that you and I do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Foamies. We're not into balsa. We're not into uh
Not yet.
quads or choppers or anything like that yet. So when we're talking about a flight box, or field box, flight box, go box, like when we talk about what we say, hey, here's what's recommended. That's based on the kind of flight we do. Like take the spirit of that and you know customize it to what you've got going on. So, mine's gonna. That is a tiny deckham quad.
It's the Tiny Hawk. I wanted to get into if the kids are going to get to the point where they can fly on their own, or when we get together, I'd love to be able to do a little bit of chase footage. And I think I wanted to get something I could rely on.
Is that one gonna be fast enough to do chase?
Planes are slow compared to
Okay.
quads.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that'll be okay.
All right. So getting into it, what is in my box? One word: everything.
What do you mean by everything?
Everything. Literally the box. So when I got all my stuff from you when I got in this hobby, and I guess you had put it all in that Tupperware container. This
Mm-hmm.
big plastic Tupperware, like Tupperware type box, or It's just a box with a
Yeah, it's
lid.
just a store. It's a clear storage box with a white lid or whatever it is,
I don't even
and
put the
it's
lid on it anymore
probably.
because it doesn't fit. I got too much stuff in the box. Um,
That's what happens with this hobby, right?
yeah,
It can
and
no longer
it's.
be contained.
I mean, for the first couple times I went up there, you remember I kind of had it all nice and packed and
Oh yeah.
organized in there,
Oh
and then
yeah.
I started showing up. It was like, okay, here's the plane that I'm building, and here's the box, and let me go back out. I gotta grab my transmitter and the power pod, and yeah,
Yeah, because you had to pull those out. There wasn't enough room anymore.
right. So, and it's just that the box got unorganized, and I wasn't about
Yeah.
trying to reorganize to get all in there. So, largely, because a lot of times I was throwing it all in the box so I could come on up, but.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, there's everything in there. I've got the the Dollar Tree floss hooks that I'm cutting down and using, like that we're using for our control arms. I've got
Mm-hmm.
my X-Acto knife. I've got another type of extendo X-Acto knife type thing. I'll have screwdrivers. I've got needle nose pliers, regular pliers. I've got spare receivers, a bunch of servos in there. I got my barbecue skewers. Half the time, my glue guns in there. There's rolls of tape. There's basically everything that is my side of the hobby is in that box and spilling out of it. And that's what I grab. And anytime I go flying, because that's where all my stuff is, I don't want to have to go. I got a straight edge in there these days. A triangle, and then like I actually
What
have a
the heck are you gonna
protractor in
do with
there.
a straight? What are you gonna do with a straight into the protractor at the field?
Don't worry about it. But obviously it's not used. It's just that's
No,
everything that's in the
it's
box.
just everything
You
you
know.
have because last time you were going somewhere with your planes, you were coming up to see me and
Mm-hmm.
you were building a little bit. So you needed a straight edge. You didn't because you could have borrowed mine.
Right.
But yeah, you wanted your straight edge, you wanted your square, you wanted your this, you wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And it was there. You had it.
I think the only like literally when I brought that box up, the only thing that wasn't in that box was my glue gun at the time, so I knew you'd
Mm-hmm.
have it, and my
Yep.
cutting mat. Like
Yep.
everything else is in
Because
the box. So
I have at least one.
right. So that is certainly not ideal, but that is what I grab when I go to the field. Because I don't want to have to dig for one little thing like my screwdriver, just my pliers to go. It's like, well, I'm going to need them back here when I go back to build. So that's
Yeah.
my flight box. Less than
Right.
ideal. Matthew, what's in your flight box?
Okay, I'm going to start out by saying my flight box was just like your flight box. Matter of fact, I'm going to say I don't know what are these boxes called? They're like the little mini tackle boxes,
Yeah,
right? They're
yeah,
the
they're little tackle
sectionalized,
boxes.
right? And so I this is almost set up just like it was when I started doing this, except I stopped bringing it. So it had all the hex screwdrivers, it had the mini hex, it had all the tweezers, like the really fine point tweezers, because heaven forbid you drop a screw into your plane. Good luck getting it out. I have an independent V-tail controller. I don't need
Oh,
it. But now see, but with that really terrible, and again, I'm not knocking on Hobby King. It was just a terrible choice for me at the time. But that Hobby King transmitter that I had that I couldn't reverse any of the directions of the servos or anything, I had a V-tail controller for that because I was planning on building Sparrow. I think is like it's like a little V-tail craft that
okay.
FT put together. And heck, I've got what is this? This is a flux pen. I've got a couple little bits of barbecue skewer and God knows what else in here. Anyway, so it's a chunk of a bunch of extra antennas, and motor mounts because I need those when I'm. No, I don't need those. Just a bunch of random stuff in here. You know what I mean? And then I'd also have thread locker that was in there. Um, yeah, and turns out zip ties. I don't bring it. I just don't bring it. I don't need it. I've what I found was if I need a hex driver because a motor is coming loose or something like that, I did something very wrong back at home, and I should stop what I'm doing, don't push it, and go home and
Hmm.
fix it. Fix it right, and then wait a day and go and do it again. Like I should not go out that day. This is my way of telling myself, no, You're done, mister. You're done. Go home. Go. Just nope. Don't fly the plane. Go home. Um, so yeah, so basically what my bag consists of are the three different transmitters that I have. I have my old radio link, I have my jumper T6. I say it's old, but I use it all the time. The radio link that I started with, the jumper T16, which has the other half of my planes, and it's anything that I want a buddy box. I'm using that as my main. And then I have the jumper T8 SG, which is the buddy box companion. So that's the one I use for the kids to buddy box with. So I have those three transmitters. um, in each transmitter box, if I'm smart, I've put an extra receiver that I don't have plugged into a plane, and it's in the transmitter box because I have a lot of planes, as Joe might attest,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have that many receivers, and I'm certainly not spending that kind of money on it. I have about 40 or 50 planes. I have like maybe 10 receivers total, something along those lines. So I take them out and I move them around. If I get to a field and I don't have one, I'll be very upset at myself because otherwise that's probably a plane I should be ready to go with. Anyway, but I can, if I have the receiver in the transmitter box, I can at least plug it in and give it a go, right?
Right.
I have my lipo bag, and then I have all the lipos that I charged up for the day, getting ready. So they're mostly the 2200s and the 1300 milliamp 4Ss or the 2200 milliamp 3Ss. So those are kind of my go-to batteries. I do have a handful of the 1300 milliamp 3 cells. Those are more for quadcopters when I'm flying those, or some of the, I'll call it the lighter flame planes like the old fogies, where there's a lot more range on the CG,
Mm.
and I want it to stay lightweight. um, let's see, like you, bring the needle nose pliers because that's how I adjust. If the throws are way out, like I don't know what happened, which should be a sign to me that I shouldn't fly that plane because something went terribly wrong, while sitting. I don't know, maybe I landed like a cat landed on it or a dog stepped on it and pulled like the horn out or something, but I usually don't pay attention. So, point is I bring the needle nose because I might have to adjust, especially if it's a maiden, I might have to adjust the control linkage
Mm-hmm.
wire and undo the Z bend a little bit or uncrimp this or that. I always have a couple sticks of landing wire, um, a landscaping wire, which is basically the control arm wire. Sometimes
Right.
I need to cut a new one for one, and two, if you've got those, I'll call it the orange can motors. They're typically like 2212, and they're like 6 turn, 10 turn, and 13 turn, or something along those lines. They come with those. Where the heck did it go? I had it right here just like seconds ago. It's playing with. Well, that was probably why, because I was playing with it, so I put it down where I shouldn't have.
Right.
Um, it's basically a collet that goes on to just a plain 3.17 millimeters, so that's 1/8 of an inch shaft. So it's a collet that goes over the shaft, and that basically is a ring. Then you put the propeller, and then you put the propeller nut on top. And as you cinch down the propeller nut, all that assembly pushes down on the collet and tightens it around the motor shaft.
Okay.
Um, and there's no same with like the 1806 motors. They have no there's no edges, so a plier won't be able to grab it unless you're just cranking the crap out of the pliers and basically damaging the nut. But what each one of those has is a hole in the very tip, and I'm showing Joe a little thing. There's a
Mm-hmm.
hole in the very tip, and you can basically take the landscaping wire. It's perfect kind of strength and diameter. It fits in the hole, and you can tighten that nut, that one last eighth of an inch, eighth quarter turn or so.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the official recommended turn. Oh no, wait, that's steel bolts. Quarter turn pass snug is the official professional term for steel manufacturing bolt tightness.
Wait, that's what I do with my oil drain plug anyway.
Exactly. You go to the point where it's like, okay, this is snug. I can't really turn it anymore without something really. You put a wrench on it and you go, and it's a quarter turn, and that's it. You don't need to do any more. After that, you're damaging the bolt or the nut or the material that you're cranking it onto, for that
Right.
matter. Anyway, so I bring those, and I bring the wire, and I think and I bring my FPV equipment, and that's I bring spare motors or spare props. I'll talk about the FPV equipment in a second. So I bring spare prop nuts if I can, because I inevitably bring. I put on the reverse and I redo the motor wires, so I'm doing everything I shouldn't do. So oftentimes they'll back out and come off. So
Hmm.
if I'm smart, I bring an extra nut just in case for any of the motors I'm bringing with. So that'll be a 5 millimeter nut, one extra of those collets, and then an 1806 clockwise and counterclockwise nuts for each of those. If I'm smart, I have all that. Usually I don't. I have a hobby knife in case I need to kind of clear up something that might be, I'll call it interfering with free movement.
Hmm.
Because usually I'm not really doing any severe builds. I don't have one of those plug-in hobby glue guns or anything like that. I don't have like a plug-in soldering iron that I can plug into my car. There's no 12 volts. I don't bring that with me typically. I don't have it. So I'm not looking to actually, like, if I bust my plane in half, just throw hot glue in it and tape it and bring it out like the next 10 minutes after it's cool. Um, but I do bring packing tape because you never know when maybe one of the surfaces comes loose and you need to kind of or comes off and you might need to tighten it down. I have a landing gear that I've built that I can basically, most flight test planes have typically a flat bottom. So what I can do is kind of put a couple skewers through the bottom plate and rubber band that landing gear on the bottom. So it
Hmm.
allows me to do touch and goes and stuff with random planes. If I think of it and I have it, then it's in there. I always have the rubber bands in a Ziploc bag. Um, and then as part of the FPV gear, I try to bring a hat. Always good to have a hat. Sunglasses are in my car at all times. The other day, I didn't put any of those on, and I regretted every second I was out flying a plane. Oh, it's terrible. But I have a little hat clip that I 3D printed. It's got a handful of bobby pins because they're metal. And then I've got this little square hat cam thing with um, a strong magnet. So that just kind of sits on top. So then I've got a hat cam.
Nice.
Um, yeah. So that always stays in the bag because I don't want to forget it. I do occasionally pull the camera out because obviously you got to pull the footage off and you got to recharge it and all that stuff. But all the other stuff stays there because if nothing else, while I'm pulling the bag out, I look down and go, "Oh yeah, right, the hat cam."
Let me go grab my hat.
Also, exactly, yeah. Let me. Well, because the hat's already in there, so I'm like, "Oh, I got
Okay.
to get the cam." Um, also, cell phone tripod for the static shots if I can. Worst comes to worst, I always have my cell phone with me. So then I can, if I don't have anything else to film with because I forgot to charge this or that, or something's not working, I can at least use the cell phone. And then lastly, I try to keep a spare battery strap. And I say lastly because I'll go back to the FPV equipment, but keep a spare battery strap. Um, Sometimes you got to cinch something down. That's pretty helpful. So the FPV equipment, I have SkyZone O2Ss, and in that container, which is just jam packed, they designed this thing with a container that's just big enough to carry the bare minimum. And that's probably my biggest gripe with those goggles. Period. Is that the case could have been a little bit bigger so we could actually comfortably carry everything we need. Um, in it, I have a 4,000 milliamp 2 cell battery, so that basically I never have to worry about whether or not the goggles are going to be charged. It won't run out of juice. I could probably fly for almost a solid day with it running and it won't go out of juice. Then I have the FPV cameras, spare antennas. I got the ducky antennas that came with it as a fallback just in case something goes wrong.
Hmm.
And the other thing, spare micro SDs. I have one or two in the goggles. I have one or two in the transmitter boxes in like a USB dongle because otherwise I'll lose them. So
Right.
basically, they're kind of stuck in a little dongle thing, um, and they're in. one in each of the transmitters. And I keep it there because I figure I'll see them when I pull out the transmitter. I don't always remember that though.
Yeah,
That I have them there.
is the spare micro SD, is that a recent addition?
More or less. I mean, as the hat cam actually becomes a real thing, like that's a relatively new addition is the hat cam,
Mm-hmm.
having a working hat cam. But I've gone out to the field and left the SD card with all the old FPV footage
Mm-hmm.
in my computer, which means I can't catch any FPV footage. I could fly FPV and have a great time, and oftentimes I will. But what I won't be able to do is record it and have anybody else enjoy it with me later.
Right.
So that's my box. I guess that's pretty long, but like I said, it boils down to my transmitters, all of them, FPV equipment, and a handful of spare stuff. So, spare control rod stuff, spare motor stuff to make sure that the prop is on and tight, and I guess some pliers to adjust that. But I don't have the Allen wrenches or anything like that. Like I said, if the Allen wrenches, the screws holding the motor on are loose, well, I could tighten it. Chances are that would be a bad idea. It's becoming loose because I forgot to put um, Loctite stuff on it.
Okay.
And if I tighten it and go flying, chances are it'll still come loose out in the field, way out there,
Well,
and
you're not
it'll
going to find it.
fall. Right, and I won't find it, and I'll be out a screw, I'll be out a plane, I'll probably be out a motor, because I may not be able to find it. So I said, rather than deal with that, what I'll do is I'll just anytime that happens, I got to bring it home and fix it right.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to talk about. I'm going to say our, maybe not recommended, but say our default box, and this will end up being the box I end up putting together for myself, and
Mm-hmm.
it's again built on the spirit of what we fly. Now I'm not gonna have any FPV stuff in here because not everybody does FPV, but it's based on what we do. So again, we're not gonna have anything balsa related here, quadcopter related. Take this as a starting point, and then add in some things maybe that you see. I need this at the field. Maybe I don't wait, and then weigh it. Like, do I need this at the field if something goes wrong, or is this something that I say if this happens, I need to bring the plane on in and either fly a different plane, or that was my one
Mm-hmm.
I was flying today, so I'm going to take it home and do some work on it, and enjoy the
Mm-hmm.
flight time that I had. Okay, so tape. I like having tape with me. Clear tape, duct tape, masking tape, packing tape, and when we say the packing tape, talking about the fiber reinforced packing tape, which I still have not found. Hadn't been
Ugh.
looking all that hard for. I gotta go into a shipping store. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Tape can be good for on-site repairs. So if you do a cartwheel, if you hit a wing, the edge is getting kind of, I would say boogered up, I guess delaminated,
Mm-hmm.
and you're worried about it messing with your airfoil, then you can run some tape around that edge, get that taken care of. And tape's just good in general. Um, it's good for MacGyvering stuff. So I can't tell you what all uses tape would have because it's sort of what you decide to use it for. Spare rubber bands. Now you covered that in your kit. Have
Mm-hmm.
some spares of the appropriate sizes. So there for a while, I had the long rubber bands and shorts. Now I'm down to just shorts, but rubber bands. You pop one on a landing because your landing gear overstressed, the rubber band popped, or you were working on putting your wing on and that rubber band finally gives out. Well, you reach in your box and you grab another one, no big deal. Spare barbecue skewers, maybe you pop one in your landing gear. Maybe as you're mounting the wing, you went a little too hard. The barbecue skewer in your plane went, so you've got a spare barbecue skewer on hand. Uh, in connection with the barbecue skewers, some sort of knife. X-Acto knife, pocket knife, wire cutters, pliers that have the wire cutters in them. And we'll talk about pliers in a second. But so you can cut down your barbecue skewer on site out there if you have to
Mm-hmm.
change a barbecue skewer.
Yep.
Um, I'm going to start carrying a handful of coins for center of gravity adjustments. Um, the Spitfire was the first time well, second time I was not able to get the CG right just by repositioning the battery. The simple soar, I was able to just pop new holes and shift the wing a bit, but a Spitfire, the wing's locked in. So I'm going to start carrying some coins for moving the CG as needed if the battery and motor's not enough. A
Okay.
battery bag. I've got one. You can have two or three or however many you want. I know some guys carry two battery bags. I've only got one battery bag for their charged lipos, and then as they deplete their batteries, they'll put it in the secondary bag, and they've got them marked in such a way so they know, hey, when my bag goes empty, I'm done flying, and they're not worried about I set these batteries down and did I mix my old battery with my new battery and this that. They know every time they reach into that bag, they've got a brand new battery ready to go. Um, and on the topic of batteries, a battery tester. Now, Matthew, I know you take those with you.
Yeah,
But
that's something I meant to mention that in my lipo bag, I always have at least one, and I'd like to
mhm.
have two. And basically, so one stays in the lipo bag to check the batteries, just in case I am a cotton-headed nitty muggins. And the other one I put in with the battery in the plane, so that way it beeps when it's low voltage to protect it from me harming the battery.
Right. And the battery tester, again, testing batteries, find out if they are properly charged when you get out to the field, if you forgot one. But also, like I said, I think you gave me two or three, so I send one up
Mm-hmm.
pretty much every time. I think there was one flight I forgot to send the battery alarm up in. And you can set the low voltage alert on that. So 3.3 is the lowest that you're going to want to fly it at because at that point
You're gonna do
you're
damage to the battery.
right. You're doing bad damage to the battery, and you're not going to have any power to do what you want to do. They typically have at least the ones we have buttons on them, or a button that you can then cycle through and set where you want the low voltage alert to go off at. Um, Depending on the plane, I tend to set it either 3.4 or 3.5, and that gives me some heads up that hey, your battery's low, time to start bringing it in. I knew with the Fogey, I had it at 3.5. It started going off. I had another two or
Still,
3 minutes of flight time on that bad boy.
so you got 20 minutes to fly on that. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
messing around. It's not that long, but it sure feels like it when you're flying the Fogey. It's
yeah,
interesting because some planes, I was going to say, when it gets down to that kind of voltage, that's where it gets exciting, Joe. Um, some planes you can, I mean, heck, I get it down to 3.7 or 3.6. It's already too low. Like I can feel it sag.
right.
And I'm like, boy, I better bring it in because this is clearly not enough to keep this thing in the air. Now, there are other ones, again, like the old Vogue, some really lightweight planes where, man, it could be a 3.0 and it's still chugging, baby. And that's the ones where you get in trouble. I think I built the Mighty Mini Speedster, and I built it as a bi-wing, and so it had lift for days. It was slow, it was fun, and I had this little tiny 450 milliamp battery or 550 amp little guy, and I ran through the battery on those really quick. Well, it felt like it was really quick. I was actually up there for about 15 minutes. But the problem was is it could fly all the way down to like 3.0 and still be flying like a champ. I mean, I didn't even notice it was at 3.0. It was still going, and I brought it down. I'm like, oh no, this is like 2.9. Oh crud! I better get this charged back up before I do damage because this was so much fun. I want to do this again. Shoot, I should have put my battery checker in there. I didn't at the time.
Right.
Um, some batteries you can some planes you can tell. It's clear when the battery sags below a certain voltage, and like certain ones, you won't be able to tell, and that battery checker is really important in those.
Right. Um, and then final bit, I think on batteries, and I had this one bite me one time. Uh, Take backup batteries for your transmitter. Now,
What?
yeah, I I had mine go. It started cutting in and out on me as I was trying to wrap up flying for the day. Like I wanted another 15, 20 minutes of flight time, but my transmitter was giving me trouble. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I couldn't identify the issue in that moment. But I finally figured out. Yeah, I got the plane on the ground, started checking stuff out, found out transmitter batteries were dead. So, your transmitter may have a battery symbol on it. It may tell you a percentage. I know mine gives me an actual voltage readout. So you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of see where your batteries are at, but I've learned I need to keep spare batteries with me. Now, the transmitters do not tear through a lot of battery. Like, you're not going to fire it up and in 20 minutes you've lost half your battery, but you know, you do bench work with your transmitter. You're working with your plane that whole time. It's steady sending signal. Um, you turn it on, you turn it off, you're going through menus. So as you're doing that work, you're steady, slowly draining that battery. You don't realize. So I've learned keep some spare batteries with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to have a full set. I may not carry a whole case of batteries, so I'm going to have a full replacement set ready for my transmitter. Now, the other
Mm-hmm.
option there is if you make a conversion on your transmitter to have a rechargeable LiPo battery cell that goes into your battery compartment. In that case, part of your before I leave home checklist is to make sure your transmitter is charged up. Um,
Sure. But it doesn't hurt to have a battery that's at least, we'll call, even if it's at charge voltage, even if it's at storage charge, and you just always have it in there as a spare. Now, granted, that's not ideal, but that should be enough power to, if your other one is out, it'll allow you to basically replace that and finish up your day.
mhm.
And then to go back and change it. So it's still not a bad idea, even if you have a LiPo as your transmitter battery, to have, again, have that storage charged LiPo spare. Just have it in your bag. It'll be all right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not something you're going to be able to hot swap while your plane's in the air, unless you're that good.
Or
But
you've got a quick friend. You got a
yeah,
quick friend. I got it. Hold on. He's like part of the Indy 500 crew.
but yeah. So take some
Stay
spare
still.
batteries. Don't forget your transmitter. That sounds simple enough. We've heard a couple. We've heard a couple stories. Um, and I have to admit I have been loading my stuff into the car, gotten into the car,
Uh,
and I was like, oh man, I forgot my soda on the counter. Let me go walk back in and grab my soda. And I walk in and there's my transmitter sitting on the counter right beside where I'd left my soda. Oh, good thing I
well, I
wanted
mean,
that soda.
right?
So
Oh my god.
don't forget your transmitter. And I actually want to get a box, one of those aluminum cases that I can then get the
Mm-hmm.
foam that you set in, but it's got little squares that you break off so you
Mm-hmm.
create a shape in there. I'd like to get that for
Harbor Freight has a bunch of those.
good. I got a Harbor Freight in town. I
Yeah,
do
go
want to
go
get
there.
one of those for my
Yep.
transmitter. Um,
You might even be able to look online. They make most manufacturers or most people who sell RC stuff may also have one for the Turnigy 9X or one that'll fit it pretty well. That's pretty much what I did with mine. Most of my transmitters didn't come with cases. I don't think that the jumper didn't, and the AT10, I don't believe that did. I had to buy
yeah.
the cases for those. The jumper T8 SG did though.
Mhm.
So you might look out. You might get one that has it, and maybe you don't. But yeah, this is good to have.
Yeah, I'm wanting to put together a transmitter box that my transmitter sets into. I can have the spare batteries in there. But
Hmm.
I was looking as I was doing some research for this episode, see what other people are doing as flight boxes. And largely, I just found where you could buy flight boxes. But one of the things I
Yeah.
saw was where a guy had his transmitter box, but it opened up, and in the lid section, he had little cubbies or little pockets for his props,
Hmm.
uh, his screwdrivers and pliers. Like you could incorporate all that into that box. So that'd be say one half of your Go box setup.
Right.
Um,
Think about it this way: the top half of your transmitter is basically covering and supporting the area around your sticks and your switches. So on the lower half of your transmitter, that's all dead air. dead
Hmm.
space, which is a great place to put, those kind of miscellaneous little tools, as long as they stay down there and they don't kind of get in the way of the other upper half stuff.
Um,
Good idea.
with with your transmitter, I recommend take a spare receiver. Now, it just so happens I always have a spare receiver because I take my whole box. But Matthew, you talked about it. Take a spare receiver because if you get out to the field and you're having trouble, planes doing weird things, you're having brown dropouts, such like that.
Poor Battle
We
Axe.
Okay, I wasn't going to bring his name up, but yeah, Battle Axe, he was having some serious trouble with his stuff. Constantly dropping and cutting out, and lost a couple planes to it. And I think it turned out, he said, that his receiver was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now would I have known that that was going to be the issue? Not necessarily.
Right.
But if you got a spare receiver, it's one more thing you try to
Mm-hmm.
diagnose while you're out there.
And
And
with that, have the bind cable too, because
yes,
it won't talk if you don't know. Like, so that's one of the nice things about the radio link. There's a bind button. It's part of the receiver itself. I
hmm
never have to worry about a bind cable, but with the jumper, I've got a bunch of the Fly Sky stuff and some of the DSMX stuff, and they all need the bind plug. So I have one sitting around the antenna.
yep,
It's on my transmitter around the antenna.
that's where I've got mine. The base of my antenna has a couple little almost like rubber washers, but it's just the shape of the bottom of that antenna. It's got
Mm-hmm.
two little boops that come out that are all the way around, and my
Yeah.
my bind cable, I'd have to check to see if it's still the case, but it's always there. So if I need to bind up a new
Yeah.
receiver, or typically anytime I'm working on the plane or I go to put it into a new one or I've swapped, I just okay, go ahead and put that bind cable on, power it up, turn the
Mm-hmm.
transmitter on. I've got it bound up. It comes back off and it goes back on my antenna, and then it's
Yeah.
always there. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where mine sits, but it's always with me. Um,
Exactly.
Pliers, we both kind of talked about pliers in our kits, but I would recommend needle nose and regular, and that's just because if for the types of, if you're doing a Z bend, or if you're doing a V bend like I do, because I don't have fancy Z bend tool and I'm not good enough to do tiny crimps. Um, just pliers for adjusting your control rods. If you, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you need to make some changes, or when we tossed my Spitfire up in the air, if we weren't crunched for time and we saw that it was cutting to the left real hard, I likely would have, if we had more time, pulled my pliers out and made the adjustment rather than trying to do it with trim. But
Mm-hmm. Right.
time as it was. Also, um, my prop nut has where you could put a wrench on it. I don't take a wrench. I've just got some regular pliers. So when I put a new prop on and I go tighten that nut down, I've got the pliers right there because I don't have a hole in the end of my prop
Right.
nut
You
nose
you have
thing.
the
So
traditional M5 nylon nut, I think.
okay. So I take a pair of pliers and grab it and tighten it down. Then I don't think I've ever had I've never had the prop nut come off. I did have it get loose one time, but that was a motor was on nose first landing. So um, spare props and spare prop nuts. Now, uh, I end up carrying just all my props because it's in my thing, but I plan on carry just a few props, depending on the situation. But I may want to carry 4 or 5 spare props. I don't have any spare prop nuts right now. I'm just going to end up going to Lowe's probably and picking up some nuts that'll fit that because I don't necessarily need the fancy cone shape. I just need if I lose my nut, I need to have one that I can put on.
Yep.
And then something I thought about a little while ago: if you are running with a prop saver, that takes a certain rubber band. It takes a little O-ring, I think, to
Yeah,
hold the
it's
prop
it's
on.
an yes, it's like a 2 3/8 inch O-ring gasket, basically,
Mm-hmm.
or an O-ring. Look, you can buy them. They're really cheap. I mean, you can buy. I think it's somewhere around like $6 to $12 for 100 of them. If you're buying them from a hardware store, if you're buying them from an RC store, you'll get 20 of them or 15 for the same price. So I mean, if you're ingenious and you're looking in, I'll call it not the traditional place an RC guy looks for them.
Hmm.
Here's I've got one right here. I knew I saw one earlier. The little ring.
Yep.
Boop. Yeah, you want to. I think it's 1/8 inch thick, or a little bit thicker. Um, very very helpful. Always have those. But worst comes to worst, what I've seen somebody do was they bought a balloon bag and they cut off the balloons and the bottoms of the balloons, the kind of thick rubbery parts.
The
They
mouth of
take
it.
those. Yeah, they took two of those and they would basically use that as their gasket, their O-ring,
Okay.
and they would use that to hold the propeller on. And
Okay.
it works. I've done it. So in a pinch, if you're hosed and you're saying, going, "Oh no, I'm out. Like I broke my last one. What am I going to do?" Go to the Dollar General, buy a bunch of buy a bunch of balloons, and get at them with your hobby knife, and you should be able to be back in the air in no time flat.
There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, carry some extra bands for your prop saber. Uh, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in there that I'm gonna put sunglasses in that box, and I'm probably gonna put a hat in that box.
Hmm.
I've got sunglasses. I never think to grab them. It's not top of my mind yet to wear sunglasses when I go out flying. So put them in your box, and then you've got your set of flight glasses that you're not worried about. Did I set them somewhere? Are they in my vehicle, or did I set them down, on the nightstand or on the computer deck? They're in the box, ready to go. And then if you like wearing a hat, hey, have a spare hat in the box. That way, if you forget yours, you still got one. And it's not something we've talked about a ton, but I'm gonna go ahead and put it on here and say, have a pre-flight checklist.
Wait, a pre-flight what?
A pre-flight checklist. You know, that thing you should do to make sure your ailerons aren't flipped.
Hey, look, I looked at my plane and it moved stuff when I moved the control surfaces
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It
But did they
moved.
move the right way, Matthew?
It'll probably be fine. Let's just throw it in the air and see.
Mm-hmm. Pre-flight checklist. Have it in your box.
That has been the downfall of at least 20 to 25% of my planes is the lack of doing having one of
A
those and
proper
using it.
pre-flight. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, I don't. So I think we'll end up having an episode in the future where we talk about various checklists. One of which would be the pre-flight checklist.
Hmm.
Um, but like always do a pre-flight. And if you got a checklist, even if you memorize that checklist at some point, but it's giving you a starting point. Like I've got a mental checklist I go through, and yeah, I roll all my control surfaces, but typically, especially on a maiden, or if it's the first time I've taken it out in a while, if I know I've taken the receiver out of it at some point, I was hooking everything up. Even if I checked it at home, when I get out to the field, I'm checking all my different control surfaces like 3 or 4 times. I'll check them when
Hmm.
they're sitting in the back of the car, roll the stick, check, yeah, it's going the right way. I carry it out there. I set it on the ground. I'm going to check it again because maybe I didn't check it, so I'm going to check it. Or maybe I got it wrong, so I'm going to check it. And then even before I check it, right before I chuck in the air, I'm going to do one more final roll through the controls just to make sure everything, and if you get yourself in a proper habit of doing a pre-flight, then you don't have to be quite so paranoid, and hey, these are the things I need to check because we've talked about, um, and there's a myriad different ways to do them, but flight test talks about checking C.R.A.P, and I don't know everything that's in there, but it is control surfaces. It's uh, check your angles, which I don't fully understand that one, but check. There's a lot of things, so that's just one part of it of a pre-flight. But I think we'll have an episode where we talk about checklists, and at that time, then we can say, here's a pre-flight that you can have. And honestly, most of you guys probably already have a pre-flight checklist, but it wouldn't be bad to compare notes against other people's checklists. So, oh man, that might be a good thing to add to my pre-flight.
So, yeah, I just did a quick check on the C.R.A.P. C.R.A.P is control surfaces, making
Okay.
sure everything's secure and it moves properly and freely. Um, Rips and tears, make sure that there are not rips and tears that are in there because during flight that might cause them to continue.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a crinkle, it's a weak point in the foam. So if you have a crinkle, if your plane will fail in the air, it'll likely be there first. Um, Angles, look for structural weaknesses. So basically, you're looking to make sure things aren't crooked. Um, and then if you have a repaired area, that it's the same angle as it was before. Because what'll happen is you like, oh well, my tail came off. I just put it back on. It's all good. But if it's off a couple degrees, that means you have a permanent turn in your plane. Like
Mm-hmm.
the body of the plane itself becomes part of your rudder turning slightly left or slightly right, depending on how you poorly modified your plane. And then P is the power system. Make sure that all the electric connections are proper, that they work,
Mm-hmm.
that there's nothing intermittent. Like if you are moving a servo back and forth and it's kind of like stuttering, don't fly with it. Chances are that something nicked your wiring, or maybe there's a loose connection or something
Or you
along the
got a
way,
gear failing.
right? Or gears failing. And if that's happening in the air, you're out.
Mm-hmm. Learned
You're
that one the
likely
hard
going
way.
to lose. Right. I think we have. All of us have. Um, so I mean, those are the many things. There's that thing, and I also do the high five method to make sure. And again, I fail every time because I'll do the high five method, but I'll be reversed. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll be standing in front of the plane doing the high five method, which that's its own special set of not okay. But so I'm like, oh, cool, going, 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 going. But the problem is I'm high fiving the wrong side, which
Right.
means if I'm doing my ailerons and it's high fiving, it's wrong. It's exactly backwards. And I think that's what happened with my first painted Spitfire flight that I was trying to get the buddy box ready for.
Mm-hmm.
When I checked my crap, I checked it reverse, and I'm an idiot. So anyway, continue on. Yeah. So having a list is important.
Yes. So all that is sort of like the starting point. That's pretty much everything you should need based on the type of flying that Matthew and I do. Again, not putting FPV in there because if you got FPV, take it. But that's a good starting point. Now, once you move from there, if you've got some extra stuff, then you start say have an expanded flight box beyond this list, and that's where you start getting into okay, I've got extra motors, I've got extra ESCs. Um, I'm willing to, if I have a problem, I'm willing to spend that kind of time on the field swapping that stuff out. So in that case, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
take a spare motor, take a spare ESC, take your screwdriver so you do the work on the
Mm-hmm.
swapping the motor out, or you take a screwdriver to make adjustments to your servos. Um,
Yep.
you know, you put on there the ball end, Allen key wrenches, some red Loctite. If you end
Yep.
up swapping the
So
motor out or
yeah, if you're
changing a screw
swapping a
there.
motor out, yeah, they typically some of the motors, depending on which ones you're grabbing, um, they will need that kind of wrench. And if you don't have it, you'll feel like a fool. You just sit there going like, "Ah, I could be in the air right now if I just thought to bring this stupid wrench."
Right.
And the red Loctite is to make sure that when you do tighten it in, it stays tight while you're flying. There's a lot of vibrations that will back out screws.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that you're using, and I say the red Loctite, and it's let me change that. That's not the red Loctite, and that it's the blue Loctite in the red container.
Yeah.
So
No, their
the
their
actual
logic was
liquid is
flawed.
blue. I don't know what the heck they were thinking, but basically, it's the red containered blue Loctite. The blue is the color of the liquid, and that is the semi-permanent. So basically, the red stuff. If you put the liquid on and the liquid is red, you will never be able to back out that screw.
Mm.
So I just that has to be clear. But yeah, you want the stuff that basically locks your stuff in place, not permanently, but good. Um, and then then you can fly with certainty that the motor's not going to just come off
Mm.
mid-flight. That's the last thing you want.
And then you've got on here two uh 12-volt LiPo tools. Talk about those real quick.
Yeah, they're basically 12-volt DC items that are like soldering irons. I know it's more critical probably for um, I'll call it for like quad pilots because a lot of their kind of correcting stuff is, you know, resoldering and desoldering stuff to the flight board and stuff like that. Obviously, what we do in the airplane world is less of that. But I can't tell you if I had a soldering iron, I could have fixed the FPV camera about 6 different times while I've been out in the field. I've got like a
Hmm.
little wire that decouples or desolders or whatever, and we're talking it's very fine. A soldering iron would have fixed that in like 3 seconds, and I would have been back in the air and having a blast with FPV. Um, and sometimes an ESC will have that kind of issue, and kind of reflowing the solder that's already there just might be enough.
Right.
And then the other thing is a 12-volt DC glue gun. And that seems silly, but sometimes when you bust your plane, it's a beautiful break. All you got to do is put a little bit of glue back in there and put it back together, hold it, and put some tape in there, and just you would have been back in the air within about 10 minutes. Now, Joe will never do that. Joe will never do that. So,
No, no, hang on now, because I seem to recall the first time that I flew one of my planes with you. It
yeah,
was
that's
the
right.
FT Delta, and what came off?
It was the firewall came right
The
off that
firewall.
power
And
pod.
what did I immediately say? Can we go back to your
Oh,
place real quick, glue it on? Like I wish we had one. Oh, do we have time before my wife gets mad?
yeah, and your
Oh,
wife was like, "Joe, where are you?" And you're like, "Oh,
uh,
I don't have time." Darn it, we're out. But
yep,
yeah,
yep.
I remember. That's right. I almost forgot about that. That was the first thing you said to me. Like, do you have a glue gun that we could use?
But that said, if I had done the packing tape to hold the firewall on in the first place,
The fiber optic and the packing tape at all. I know some of the guys have really good just experience with the plain packing tape.
mhm,
It's certainly a help. I like the fiber reinforced packing tape. It tends to hold. I've had a couple times where there's been like minor tears at the top of that uh, thing, and what'll happen is that packing tape will then give in a crash, and the fiber reinforced stuff will not.
mhm.
It'll wiggle, but it won't like completely come off. So I don't know which is better.
So the expanded section of that is just to say, start with start with the basics. What do you need to fly? What do you need if something goes wrong? You bust a prop, rubber band
Hmm.
breaks, your batteries go dead. Like here's what you need to fly and to be able to continue flying if something minor goes wrong. Now, from there, if you're wanting to expand on that, absolutely. Here are some things to think about. And what do you have? What do you need, or what are you comfortable doing more of, repair wise or maintenance wise, in the field? Add that to your
Hmm.
box. But you
Yeah.
can certainly start with the standard list that we said. And yeah, it sounds kind of long because Matthew and I chatter a lot as we're going through stuff, but all that will fit in a small box, and it's
Yeah.
not that much. Like it's a lot to talk about why, but it's not that much to it. Put it in a box. You're ready to fly. Especially that's your box that you take flying. So what's in there? Don't take out of there when you're at home working. Have some other tools that you use at home. Have some other
Yeah.
supplies that you use when you're home ready to go. Or if you are going to take it out, part of your pre leaving home to go flying, take inventory of your box and make sure you put it all back in there. Because what's the point of
Hmm.
your go to flight box if you've taken stuff out of it?
Yeah. You could just say, "Don't pull a Matt Allen." And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the field. I'm literally gotten to the field and went, "I don't have the batteries for that," or "My transmitter's at home," or "Where's the receiver?"
Mm-hmm.
And if I had just like had a little checklist before I left, I would have gotten it all. And I think what Joe's getting at is this is our hobby, and we don't all have a whole lot of time rolling around that we can just spend a day getting things ready. Most of the time, I don't know about Joe, but I'm running between this, that, and the other, and I'm like, oh, I've got an hour. It takes 10 minutes, no, 15 to get to the field. I think I've got this plane ready. Do I have a couple lipos ready? Yeah, I think I do. Okay, quick. Put the lipos in the lipo bag, grab the go bag, grab the plane, throw it in the front seat. Boys, come on, we're going. I'm like, what? Just get your shoes on, let's go. And I've got 20 minutes at the field to fly, but that
Hmm.
might be the only 20 minutes I get for the next 3 days. So I'm excited to have it. So my problem is, you know, I want to make sure that while I'm there, I'm actually able to fly and enjoy it. And, having a quick checklist to say, okay, got the transmitter, got the thing, got the lipos, and is there the checkers in there? Got the thing, good, good. Plane, wiggle it around. Okay, it's not wiggling. Good, that's perfect. You know, I'm specifically referring to my arrow. It's been beaten so bad it wiggles a bit.
In that case,
Um,
it's not wiggling too bad.
Exactly. I'm like, nah, that'll do. I put it in the plane, but knowing that it might be its last flight. But the point is when you do that, you're kind of like, okay, good. I've got everything I need. I've got the basics. All right, let's go out to the field and let's go have fun. Some of that is because if you are set out to go have fun, and something happens, and you ask, like you did, Joe. If you had no more props, if you forgot to bring your props, that maiden flight would have been the end of your flying time with the Spitfire that day.
Yep.
That would have been sad because we had so much fun just going around and flying and doing all the other stuff we did with the Spitfire that day.
Hmm. And you've seen the back of my car when we get out there, and I've got all my stuff. Like, how many
Hmm.
props are there? There's a ton
Enough.
of props. I'm not running out of props. Um,
Exactly. And if you had run out, I had a couple with me too. I'd have
yeah.
been happy to give you whatever you needed to get you back up in the air. And I think that's the other thing with this hobby is if you are completely out, if you got a handful of friends at the field, like they're most likely going to give you a prop and say, "Dude, just get in the air again. That was awesome. I enjoyed watching you fly." When you get a chance, if you have a couple extra propellers next time you buy them, just bring a couple by, or next time that they break one, just here, dude, take a couple of mine.
Hmm.
Thanks. And it's a good time. That's the goal, is to not stop the good time. Because I'll tell you what, I know a couple guys at our field. They take 45 minutes to an hour to get to our field. So I can't even imagine setting everything in your car, leaving, getting to the field and going, ah, crud, my transmitter's at home. That'd be,
Or,
I'd be
or I
weeks for me to,
grabbed the wrong lipo bag. It had the dead batteries in it.
right, right. You're just like, oh, that'd be the worst. Seriously, and so the goal of all of this is to keep you flying so that you aren't stopped by dumb things. We're gonna, you're gonna fly. You're gonna try new things and maybe make foolish mistakes, but you should be able to have time to learn from them and try again, so you can put that what you learned into practice.
Hmm.
And you can't really do that well if every time you crash, you have to go all the way back home. And maybe like me, I've got to wait another couple days before I get a chance to go back out again. So if you have all that stuff there to make the simple repairs and fix it so that things fly the way you want them to, you'll be able to spend more quality time flying and enjoying, and less time frustrated that nothing was working like you hoped. And so if this helps you get there, then I think we've done everything we hope to do.
Right. Well, Matthew, let's work on getting into the ending of this. What is on your workbench right now?
Okay, we have, let's see, I want to do the fine tuning paint job on the Spitfire if it flies again. I think it will. Um, I have that 50% 7. I wanted to put a color scheme on and get that so it'll be exciting.
Hmm.
I have I have a couple secret projects. One of them, um, let's see, it's another baby plane. And I want to get that working, and I'm very close.
It
So
is
I'll
cute
probably
and
work on that.
adorable.
It is. It's so adorable. Um, but what I want to do is I'm going to get that working, and give that another try. Um, and so that's going to happen. I think we've got a couple other little things going on, and I have not forgotten the Viking. Um, it is. I'm at the point where I should be uh, getting a maiden here in the next episode or two.
Did you get the landing gear on it?
No, but I figured out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to put the landing gear in. That was half the
Matthew.
problem, is I kept rolling
Matthew.
around in my head how I'm going to. I know it seems simple, right? It seems like it should be just, put it in. But
But you promised us.
I did it. You're right, I did. Okay. So then
I'm ragging on you.
fine, consider it done. I'll just make sure that's what I do. And
I'm
I'll be
ragging
fine.
on you.
Honestly, I'm excited. I know, and it's okay. I'm excited about it. I'm looking. I've got it here on the table here, and I'm looking at it. I love this plane. It's a beautiful looking plane. So I can't wait to see it in the air.
Okay.
What about you, Joe? What are you working on? Obviously, you
Um.
painted your Spitfire now.
Yeah. So that's not on Workbench. So the paint job's done, but I still need to get the canopy. So the
Mm-hmm.
poster board that wraps the formers on top, I need to. I've still got that. I don't know that I'm going
Air
to
brakes.
recut it. Yeah, Battle Axe love calling him that.
Yeah.
So I need to paint the poster board that's going to go on the top, and then I think I want to paint the cockpit section, that insert that we did.
Yeah.
I'm just going to paint that black, and then have the camo, continue on to the poster board, and then
Mm-hmm.
it should be done.
Yeah. Pretty
That
much.
we talked about it during build party, and the guys were ragging on me a bit about why would you do that thing, but I want to get that one finished up, painted, get one or two flights out of it that I say, okay, it's flying good, this, that, and then that one is going to hang in the garage, and not be flown very often. I'll probably build another Spitfire that I'm not worried about. Oh, I put this beautiful paint job on it, which then chances are I'm going to turn around and paint the next one too. But um, I don't
But
want to
even
put all
if you
the
bust that second one, you have another one still that you can go,
right.
ooh, that's a good looking bird.
But that said, I think this coming weekend I'm riding up with my wife to see her parents, so I might be able to get some flight time with my father-in-law.
Ooh, that'd
In
be
which
good.
case I'm taking the 7, and I should be able to get another project that we're aware of wrapped up by then, and hopefully I can fly that while I'm up there too.
You said you're bringing the 7 or you're bringing the Spitfire?
The Spitfire.
That's what I thought. I thought you were talking
Yeah.
about the Spitfire. You said the 7. That's all.
No, another project.
Right. Gotcha.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
so
Wait, now
that's that.
this is the father-in-law who has the Simple Cub.
Yes, that I probably won't be able to get out and fly anyway yet. He still hasn't been able to get out of country to get the surgery he needs.
Mm-hmm.
COVID has continued to keep that on lockdown, but we'll
Yeah,
go up
right.
there, see him. Maybe he'll be able to get out and watch the flying.
Right.
If
I'm sure
not,
he'll enjoy it
then
though.
yeah. If not, then we'll sit downstairs or upstairs and talk
Mm-hmm.
about the planes, and I'll show him, and we'll be able to have a look at his,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe Rachel and
Get
I
his.
going by the school down the road, and I can watch the plane for a few minutes on the way
Yeah,
home.
right. Yeah, hopefully you can get his Simple Cub working for him or help him
Yeah.
with whatever he's kind of stuck on. I know part of it is because his physical ailments
Hmm.
really make that very difficult to stand and or sit with any kind of back ailments. Usually is terrible. So, but if you need anything, just reach out. I've built the Cub well, at least once, um, and I'd be happy to help out. I think the last time you were up there, you tried to reach out, and I don't know what I was doing.
I don't know. Doesn't matter. Either way, it's going to be
Mm.
an enjoyable weekend.
Yeah, it sure will
Um,
be.
do we know what we're doing next?
Uh, well, we have a couple ideas going on. We have a potential interview, and or we might be talking about our covering methods because you've gone through a couple different, and I've gone through a couple different And so we might talk about what we've done so far to change the Adams Dollar Tree Ready board foam from a white block of plane that flies in the sky to something that you can be extra proud of and excited about.
Hmm.
And to protect it against the weather and things like that.
Okay.
So it'll be one of those two. We'll see.
Well, I'm looking forward to either one of those. Both
I
of
know,
them.
me too.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and work on wrapping it up here, guys. So thank you again, and as always, for listening in. Feel free to email us any questions you might have, aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. We've not had anybody utilize it yet, but you can go to anchor.fm and look us up on there, and there's a voicemail message option there. Feel free to swing by our Discord. The old Discord links for the build party are now dead, but I will put an updated Discord link in show notes that you can click on and join us in our Discord. And we've got guys in here that are chit-chatting throughout the day and doing build parties on their own, so they'll link up a couple in a channel, just hang out and chit-chat. If nothing else, it's nice just to be able to have somebody to talk to while you're building.
Exactly. Oh, say hi to us on our Facebook page if you get a chance. We've been trying to post. That's where I like to try and post any events we might be doing or any questions we might have. I don't know. Just reach out to us. Tell us how you're doing. Tell us what you're up to. We'd love to hear about it. Tell us how we're doing.
Well, guys, thanks again, and we will see y'all next time.
All right. See you then.